Hi, my name is Kevin, and I collect old irons. The main thrust in our videos is largely the common categories with representative examples in each category, but we have left out some of the minor details, some of the less important pieces, some of the minor categories, and some of the rare items. And those are some of the pieces we're going to cover today. To begin, one of the very common things you see, especially for the European irons, but American irons as well, are these what we call strap handles. They're wide, but they're very thin. They pretty obviously would not be very easy to use. There is something missing here. These irons, again, particularly these flat irons with the round backs, very common in northern France and Belgium, Netherlands, would have had a wooden handle on a hinged piece, and that would pretty easily click right here, and that would allow you to use these irons. These strap handles, again commonly found in the flat irons, are also found in the larger European irons, American irons some as well, especially for the slug irons and for some of the charcoal irons. Again, having a strap handle, I don't have any of those to show. I've had plenty in my time, but I've more recently gotten the complete versions and then passed on the other irons to other collectors. What you see here is you see a leather handle. The leather handle is, this one here actually is the leather is apparently over a horsehair beneath it. There's maybe a fabric beneath the leather here. Sometimes there's a wood element as well. But what happens is that leather deteriorates with time, and we should remember that these irons you're looking at here and the irons of these general types are at least 100, more likely at least 150 to maybe 2 or more years old. So that being the case, if those are stored in a moist area or an area with insects, then the leather is long gone. And for that reason, you find a lot of the strap handles. You very seldom find the leather pieces. But if you see the leather piece included on the iron, that means it's something you maybe should pick up. And still talking about European irons, although there are some American irons of this general type. This is a type that we've not made mention of at all. It's quite unusual. One of these days I'll visit a collector who's got enough of these things that we can make a video of them. But this is called a hot water iron. It's got a little cap on here, almost like a gas cap. But what you do is take this off and you boil some water and you pour the water in here, and now you have hot water in here. Again, hot water keeps its heat for quite a long time, and you can do some ironing with this. This is, amongst these hot water irons, this is by far the most common. These hot water irons, this one has a value of perhaps $100. Again, some of the rarer examples are worth more. Another European iron, we've talked about the gopher irons. This is an iron that came up in a recent auction. I have, in talking about these auctions, I've talked about the idea of hunting and looking for opportunities. That is something that, it's not something I absolutely have to have, but if the price was low enough, man, I might push that button. And this is an example. This is a gopher iron. It's all wrought. It's very pretty. It's got a clamp on. It clamps onto a table. The turn screw here is brass, and it's got another brass element here for decor. It's all wrought. This is wrought as well, so it's probably quite old. I'm gonna guess maybe the 1700s or into the early 1800s. I'm not sure exactly how you date the screw. And this one, again, there are a lot of such irons out there. They're usually quite expensive. They're usually all brassy. But this one was for $70, and I thought that was a good deal, so now it's mine. Another category that we've not talked about previously, actually what I'm talking about here could probably be encompassed into several categories, and those are the wood pressers. Some of them are veritable pieces of furniture, and I hope to visit another collector that has those to offer so we can do a video on those. But these are these small pieces. This one, I'm going to go ahead and take this apart, and what you would do is be able to put a tie here and clamp it shut, and sit for an amount of time, and that would press your, again, handkerchief or tie or something like that. And this one came, this is why I bought this on an online auction, came with a bigger piece. I haven't actually played with this very much here. Okay, here we are. This one would be used probably for a pair of pants. By the way, it's the wood here is quite exquisite. But the reason that I bought this is because it has provenance. There's a little label here. It says, this article was made by a St. Dunstan's war-blinded soldier. St. Dunstan's refers to the St. Dunstan's, a hostel for war-blinded soldiers and sailors established in 1914 and still exists. It is near Regency Park in the outskirts of London, and this must surely come from the 1920s. The photograph that I have here is from 1929. This one tells a story. And again, these pressing irons here are not particularly sought after by collectors. They come in various shapes and sizes. Most of us as iron collectors need to set limits. Only those that have unlimited room can afford to take on all the various minor and unusual examples in each category. But this one with the provenance struck me as interesting. Also in another video, we talked about irons used in advertising. And it wasn't long after I made that video that I came upon this iron on eBay. It didn't go for much, $30, $40 if I remember right. I was surprised it went that low, in that there's some very specific information here. This is a political iron. It reads on top, Judge B. Madison, Chairman, Democratic Party, and looking on the sides, Athens, Tennessee, McMinn County. So this is a unusual and interesting advertising iron used politically, and one of the only such things that I've ever seen like this. In one of our early videos, we talked about the polishing irons. The polishing irons have a rounded bottom. The purpose is to concentrate the weight so you can get an extra sharp sheen in the collars or perhaps the fronts of shirts and so forth. Polishing irons are quite diverse, but they generally are elongated, have a very typical iron kind of shape. They might be rounded fore and aft like this one is. But this one is very interesting. I've never seen one like this until recently at an auction. This one's round. Looking down on it from above, it's round, it's not elongated, it is rounded on the bottom. I have little doubt that this is a polishing iron for fabric. It just is extremely unusual. The seam irons are a minor category. We covered them combined with the sleeve irons in an early video. The seam irons are for where you have the seams on the edge of pants and so forth. They are usually heavy and they are long and narrow. Again, fairly unusual group, and amongst this group there's nothing more unusual than this one. This is a seam iron. Again, there it is from the bottom. And the handle, well, at least the front of the handle, comes off. It is still attached on the back. What's the point of this? I'm not sure absolutely for sure, but I think the idea here was that you'd have this at the edge of your stove, and this would not heat as heavy. Of course, it's only loosely connected to the posts in any case, so you can let this heat up, and now I can connect this, and here we are. This is a rare piece. This piece is worth several $100s, and I was very happy to get that in an auction a year ago. We talked about the millinery irons. Among them is the flower irons, and this is an unusual flower iron. It's got some markings on it from New York, so it is American. It's unusual because of its size. This is a really, really large. More typically, they're about yay big. This one is of large size, and also the mold here is made out of aluminum, and usually the mold is either iron or brass. The bottom oftentimes is brass with an iron mold. This one has an aluminum mold. So, an interesting piece. We have done a couple of videos on the electric irons. Only a short time ago we did on the early electric irons. And then, subsequent to that trip, I've come across two more electric irons. This one's not particularly early. What distinguishes this one is it's got a glass body inset into a metal bottom. This is from the Detroit Appliance Company, and I have checked. There still is a Detroit Appliance and Repair Company in Detroit. Whether that's the same company as this, I'm not sure. I've gone back and forth with Jay, and we both agree that this was probably made during World War II, again as a way of saving the metals that ordinarily would be used in the bodies of these irons. There is the Silver Streak irons. That is another company, Pyrex, and that the company, as rare as those things are substantially more common than these. These are pretty hard to come by. While we're on the topic of the glass irons, here is not a working iron per se, but you do see a lot of these. Not just irons. The Stroh Company in Jeanette, Pennsylvania, made candy containers, and I happen to have one of the ads for the Sat iron. This would be an electric iron candy container. They would have candy in here, and there'd be a label that you'd peel away, and you'd have candy, and then kids would also have a toy afterwards. Another electric iron, and this is similar to an electric iron that we did in that early electric iron of a few videos ago. This again has this little thing that you press to start the electricity. I'm trying here not to do irons that I've already done, but there's something interesting about this. This is not the same iron as we saw before. This is a bit later. The position of the plug is different. The thing doesn't click quite the same way as the one we saw earlier, but what makes this one interesting is the plug. This is a very early plug. Now, the standard plugs that we have today that have two tines that are parallel to one another, side by side, that design only presented itself in about 1915 here and in England. This one has the two tines in tandem, one in front of the other. And I would like someday to actually do a video on these early electrical plug devices, because we do see them associated with the irons. And if anybody has an iron that has the original plug that is different than the ones we have today, or not just the screw type, please send me pictures, and I'll start pulling those together someday in the future. As long as I've been collecting irons, I have been collecting stands that are in the iron shape. I have these things surrounding near the ceiling in this room all the way around. Must have 150 iron shaped trivets altogether. And came onto this one fairly recently. This one is interesting, and I've never seen one like it. The shape is pretty ordinary, except that it's got a soapstone piece in the middle, which then can be removed and can slide into this. I think one reason you probably don't see very many of these things is these things can easily fall out and break. That soapstone piece is in itself interesting to me. I've never seen one like it, but it's interesting to me for another reason as well. There's quite commonly here in New England are what we call the Hoods patent Sat irons. Phineas Hood patented these things out of New Hampshire in 1867, and these irons have a soapstone piece used for insulation between the handle and the bottom. Now, I am a geologist, and I do have an eye for texture in the rocks that I see. Geologists all know that, every granite is different, and you can actually, by a piece of granite, you can tell oftentimes what quarry that might have come from. And that's largely true for soapstone as well, and the grain size and color of the soapstone pieces here are quite similar. I think that the soapstone here came from across the border in Quebec from New Hampshire, where there are some soapstone quarries, or actually some asbestos and soapstones associated with that. So anyway, we have an interesting stand, and it may well be associated with a well-known iron. Unfortunately, the stand doesn't have any markings, so we can't be sure on that. I'm also interested in the sad iron heating devices. We've done 3 videos thus far on those, for the heating devices on top of wood stoves, on top of kerosene stoves, and the natural gas sad iron heaters. I came onto this one in a specialty auction some while ago, and this is really unusual. Most of our sad iron heaters heat multiple irons, so you can switch one iron to another. This one instead is for a single iron, and this is just a generic iron that I'm using here. The iron you'd put on the stove, and you would then close this around. This would contain the heat and heat the iron more uniformly, maybe quicker. If I can go ahead and take this off. This is the Victor sad iron heater. It says so on both sides. Patent applied for. I have not been able to find the patent for this. Their patent might be out there. It's just because Victor might be the company rather than the patentee. It just hasn't come to light. Very interesting piece. And by the way, this is in exquisite condition, and I paid a couple $100 for this just to give you a sense for value. And let's finish with some interesting small irons. These are called the Amazacs, named after the small village in central Mexico where they derive, which is Amazac de Mota. Again, small village, about 50 miles, I guess, southeast of Mexico City. These are made of steel. The bottoms are a rather thin steel plate, beautifully inscribed, often overlain in silver. The handles are usually wire, also decorated. The sizes range from 1/2 inch to nearly 4 inches. This is a large example, 3 3/4 inches, that's almost 10 centimeters. It sold for $100 in an auction a couple of years ago. The age of these is uncertain. My take is that these were often made in the 1920s, 1930s, although they might have been made for some number of years and maybe some decades earlier than that. They are again made from a small village in central Mexico, and those of us who have been to Mexico know that the souvenir shops in Mexico are legion. And what these are not toys, these are little pieces of folk art. And what I think happened was that in this village there was a blacksmith shop, and the blacksmith here who is taking and cutting out these shapes of sheet steel, and then is dispersing these to lots of people in the village who are then inscribing these. When you look at the designs here, they're obviously done by multiple hands. Some of them are quite ornate, some of them are quite artistic, others are simple geometric designs and so forth. And so these were made and used as souvenirs in Mexico for quite easily could have been 30, 40, 50 years, for the life of this blacksmith that found this particular niche. These are quite collectible. There are iron collectors that to some degree specialize in these, might have 30, 40 or more of them. They used to be quite high priced. These used to be $100, $200 a piece. At a recent auction, I wound up getting 2 of these in a lot for $30, and then the 2 small ones and another large one for $70. So I paid $100 for all of these, which was a very good price. They are something to keep an eye out for. With all that said, thank you very much for this video on interesting irons, and our next video is going to be on interesting fluting irons. I have a big collection of fluters, including many unusual and different types, and so we can spend some time on that. Please do subscribe, please do send me your comments, and I look forward to seeing you again.